Sustainability, so please stay tuned. We will be right back. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is Seeking Sustainability Live number 86, and we have Jon Walsh. Jon Walsh has been mentioned many times by other speakers in the series about giving advice to schools, to businesses about how to grow fresh food right on your balcony, right on your roof, no matter where you live in the city. So you've got so much great advice to give us. Thank you so much for joining, Jon.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for joining the series. You were
Yeah.
actually in the first Seeking Sustainability with a group talking about growing food. Thank you so much.
Yes, I checked the date when that happened, and it was April the 17th, I think, which seems ages ago. But it wasn't. It was only like about 3 or 4 months ago.
Right.
And you're now up to number 86, which is pretty impressive, so well done.
Amazing. So let's start with introducing your business a little bit. So your business is called BusinessGrow.
Yes.
BusinessGrow.net, if people want to find it.
Yeah.
Can you just give us a little introduction of your business?
Yeah. BusinessGrow, it's got two major focus areas. The first one that started when I first came to Japan is basically corporate communications. And I focus on basically producing corporate communications materials like articles, press releases, that kind of thing for businesses. I'm still doing that. And then the latest part of the business is urban farming and sustainability. And that kicked off 9 years ago in 2011, which I'll go into very soon. And that basically focuses on 3 different areas. Number one, the main focus, urban farming. Number 2, sustainable practices, things like recycling, teaching people how to barter, things like time banking, which is not so well known, but a very good practice in terms of getting services for free. And then the third strand of this is survival skills and disaster preparation, which is a very important thing here and linked to why I started urban farming. Because Japan, as many people know, gets earthquakes every single day. Most of them we don't notice, but the big ones we do. And disaster preparation is on, I think, everyone's mind. There's always the risk of earthquakes, and now flooding too. So I think it's a good idea to be ready, and I teach people about how to actually get prepared for earthquakes and other kind of natural disasters.
Yeah, you're doing so much. We'll talk more specifically about some of your tips a bit later. Just to introduce, you've got 2 Facebook group pages,
Yes.
Food Havens Tokyo and Sustainable Cities Urban Food, which I'm showing at the bottom of the screen right now. I'd also like to introduce that you used to do, before Corona, you were doing a lot of face-to-face consulting for urban farming, but now you've transitioned to the online.
Yes, yeah. And that was really good. That's I was basically offering what's called a urban farming quick start pack, and that's basically face-to-face on-site consulting for people in Tokyo who wanted to learn how to grow food and who wanted specific advice on how to start their own garden at home. So I used to go to people's houses and teach and give them like a rundown about urban farming, and then teach them 1 or 2 lessons that they asked for about how to grow food. And then we'd go outside to usually their balcony or their backyard, and I'd give them specific advice on how and where to grow food at home. Now, like many things, when the coronavirus hit, that stopped, and I transitioned. I basically put that entire service online. So I'm now providing a service where I can basically do exactly the same thing, but for people worldwide.
That's
which is
great.
great.
Yeah. And
It's
according to your diagram here, it looks like the only difference between face-to-face and online is that you don't go and install it for them or with them, right? That's the only different part.
yeah. That's going to come back when normality comes back. Yeah, but I can basically tell people exactly where to go to buy garden equipment, exactly what plants to buy, when to sow seeds, when to plant, that kind of thing, all via the internet like this.
Yeah. So you've worked with businesses such as the Grand Hyatt. Can you tell us what you were doing with the Grand Hyatt?
Yeah, the Grand Hyatt was basically my company's signature project, and that basically happened. I was hosting a urban farming seminar in Tokyo in November, about 3 years ago, and one of the people that came was the international marketing manager for the Grand Hyatt Hotel in Tokyo, for the Grand Hyatt Tokyo. And at the end of my presentation, she came up and she said, "Oh yeah, the hotel's got a nice outside deck. Can we chat?" So I went in with my business partner and had a couple of meetings, and they basically gave us the project to install 4 raised gardens and 6 large terracotta pots and a fence garden. And my business partner and I basically spent about 7 or so hours over 2 mornings doing that from scratch. And they had a garden installed right outside their French kitchen restaurant, which is, I think, the main restaurant in the whole hotel. Mm-hmm. And we taught the chef how to sow seeds. So he was basically going outside. He was sowing seeds himself and picking fresh, like microgreens and other vegetables for the kitchen, for the restaurant. And that was really eye-opening on many levels. I think that was the first organic vegetable garden set up at a hotel in Tokyo, actual vegetable garden, and that sort of gave me many ideas about how that could be replicated at other hotels, and places like restaurants could have gardens set outside. Embassies, most embassies have a kitchen and a chef on site. They could have a garden installed where the chefs just basically go outside and grow their own food and pick it and put it on plates for guests and for the ambassador's family and so on. So much potential.
Yeah. And there's so many positive effects of that, right? Like you're creating a beautiful space where it was just concrete. You're cooling down the area. Yes. You're also providing fresh ingredients, which is very attractive to the customer as well as to the chef, because they want to make things taste as best as possible, right?
Yeah. Well, one of the big things is, one of the big benefits is basically tied to the recent trend of farm to table. And for people who don't know, farm to table is basically where food goes directly from the farm where it's grown to the table where it's eaten. And if you have an on-site garden, the food will basically go from your garden to your table. And if the garden's right outside the restaurant, for example, at the hotel that I mentioned, it's just a matter of meters. So the actual the space that the food travels, that's directly related to food miles, which is a big contributor to climate change. That gets cancelled. Yeah. And the food is hyper fresh. It can be picked minutes before it's consumed, and if no chemicals are used to produce it, it'll taste natural, fantastic. So it's all good. It's all good.
And one of the things you used at the hotel, which you use with a lot of your clients, is the raised flower beds. Do you want to
raised gardens are absolutely fantastic. Raised gardens are the next best thing to a garden in the ground, because plants, when they're growing, plants of all types, they're happiest when they're growing in the ground. If they're in a container or a flower pot, if the plant gets very big, then the roots will grow deeper and they will sense that they are in a confined space. And if a plant's roots don't have much space to grow, then the plant's not going to grow very big, which is largely why plants that grow in the ground grow much bigger than plants that grow in pots and containers. And a raised garden is like I said, it's the next best thing to growing food in the ground. And you can trick a plant, providing the soil depth in a raised garden is deep enough. You can trick your plants to think that they actually are in the ground, and they will grow to their maximum height. And besides that, there's a huge benefit to raised gardens, which is it doesn't matter what the surface is that they're on. You can set up a raised garden on a driveway, in a car park, on plastic, inside a swimming pool, on a rooftop, on a sandy beach, on a mountaintop. You can set them up anywhere you like. And you just have to basically just make a square wooden frame and put soil in it. So the surface that the raised garden is on, it doesn't matter, which means you can set them up anywhere.
And the same for large planters, right? Like you also recommend the Grow Brick kit if people want to have a kit to get started, and that includes a planter pot, and then the Grow Racks. Those are...
Yeah. Grow kits are basically just it's a standard planter box that comes with a tray, a bag of soil, a packet of seeds, and a plant stick label so that you can write the name of what you planted on there. I basically provide those as a one package. A grow rack is basically, it's a office or indoor shelving unit. They typically have about 3 or 4 shelves. They're kit sets. You can buy them from home stores for about 3,000 or 4,000 yen, and you basically set them up outside, and then you put planter boxes on them. And by putting planter boxes on shelves, it helps to raise them up, which I'll talk about soon, to maximize their exposure to the sun, so they'll grow faster and more and bigger.
And it's very easy and tidy to keep on your balcony. Is a bit tidier, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it basically gets things off the ground. So if you got kids or little cats, dogs, whatever, who like playing out there, it'll sort of make sure that there's space for them.
Or hanging laundry, right?
Hanging laundry, that's it. Yeah.
One other balcony thing which I really liked is you were explaining how to build a rain collector.
Oh yeah,
on the roof.
Rain collectors. Basically, I think when many people think about rain collectors, they think of basically water tanks that are connected to downpipes coming off the roof. But I collect water myself just by using a plastic sheet and connecting one long side to the side of the house outside, and connecting the other side to the top of the balcony wall, and making it a concave shape like that, and angled downward slightly, so that any rainwater just drains directly into a funnel that's in the mouth of a large 20-litre water tank. The best performance that I had with that was one really rainy weekend about 3 years ago. It was raining non-stop for about 2 days. I captured about 60 litres of water in 3 water tanks, which kept my my home gardens watered for a week.
Wow, that's great.
That was pretty good. Yeah.
And of course, plants love rainwater. I've heard more than tap water, because it just comes naturally, and it's not added with any chemicals or anything like tap water sometimes is.
Yeah,
but also the benefit is you're taking the pressure off of the infrastructure from much rain that you're actually helping decrease flooding, right?
That's exactly what happened. Yeah. That's exactly what happened. 2 years ago, when there was the typhoon hit Detroit in the States, there's basically like a typhoon came over and parked right on top of the city, and apparently the whole city sustained massive flooding because most of the city's concrete. The rain had nowhere to go except down. And this is a huge factor, because if it rains in the countryside, the rain just filters down through the soil. But if rain rains on concrete, it doesn't go anywhere except down. And if you collect rainwater, that does take it out of the, that does help to reduce flooding. Lots of people do it, of course.
Yeah, that's great. I read that about LA as well, that LA always has water droughts, but they actually have a lot of rain. but they have too much concrete and not enough plants or grassy areas to soak it in, and people not doing the catchment system. So there's so much benefit, not only to your plants, but to society as well as the environment, right?
Yeah. Well, if I was the mayor of Tokyo, I would basically, one of the first regulations that I would bring in would be that every new house, every 10 houses that were knocked down, like because they were too old, whatever, I'd basically have a regulation where 1 out of every 10 new houses would have to basically be converted into a community garden to help to produce food for the locals, and also to absorb rain and to reduce the risk that that town would sustain flooding.
Yeah, definitely. Yesterday we were talking to Ian Davey, and he rebuilt an old IKEA abandoned house into an eco house, and he has a green roof and solar on his main roof, right? And so if there was a law that any new building or any new remodel had to have either a green roof or at least solar, you know, we could really solve a lot of problems with energy and insulation and catching the rain and growing things, you know.
Yeah. Well, this is it's one of the exciting and the frustrating things about how we are dealing with climate change. We've got the answers now. We've got all the answers we need. We've got all the technology we need. All we have to do is upscale it.
Yeah. I want to mention your work with Second Harvest.
Oh, yeah.
Can you introduce them?
Yeah. Second Harvest Japan is Tokyo's only food bank. And it's run by Charles McJilton, who's a person I greatly admire here. He's one of the few people who actually, he spends his whole time helping to put food on plates for people who need it. And we're talking homeless people in Tokyo, we're talking single mothers. And since the big earthquake up in Tohoku, his business has taken off, basically channeling supplies from Tokyo up north to give to people that need it up in Tohoku. And so Second Harvest Japan, they basically deal in food, and they take it from people that donate it, and they give it to people that need it. But from what I know, they largely deal in processed food, so it's canned and it's packaged food. And I've always admired Second Harvest Japan and Charles McJilton, and I thought, how can I help? And then I sort of quickly realized, well, I deal with food too. That's fresh. So I contacted them and said, hey, do you want some fresh food? They said yes. So I started a strategy 2 years ago called Food Havens Tokyo, which you mentioned before. And Food Havens Tokyo, in a nutshell, is where I encourage other urban farmers around Tokyo to grow food and give some. So the entire strategy can be summed up in 4 words: grow some, give some. So if a person starts a balcony garden, or a school starts their own garden at school, or an office sets up a rooftop garden, if they join Food Havens Tokyo, they'll be asked to designate a small part of their garden to grow food to donate to Second Harvest. It could be 10%, it could be what they grow in 20 planter boxes if it's a reasonably sized garden. If someone's got a home garden, it might just be what they grow in 1 planter box. But they have to agree to grow that food and to donate it to Second Harvest Japan for free. And my strategy here is to basically eliminate urban food shortages by getting as many schools and businesses and private people to grow food and give some to Second Harvest Japan, and flood them with fresh Tokyo grown food, so that Second Harvest Japan gets an ongoing flow of incoming Tokyo grown fresh vegetables that they can just hand out, and they do. I've made nearly 10 donations to them last spring and last year, and depending on what day that you take the food in, it'll be gone and eaten within hours. So it's a great thing. It really is good.
That's great.
It makes a real impact. And when it comes to social responsibility, CSR and that kind of thing, I think there's not much more important and effective things we can do than putting food on plates for people that need it. It's not money. It's real food, and all need that. And if it's healthy and growing without chemicals, even better.
That's something people have been commenting on this year, is with the lots of rain in July and not enough sun, that their vegetables in the supermarket was getting more expensive, and that people who are trying to grow for themselves were not having as good crops as usual, right?
Yeah.
So having this kind of system where people who are growing something are willing to donate, that really helps support the community a lot.
Yes, it does. Yeah. I think about 2 or 3 years ago, there was massive flooding in, was it Kyoto, I think it was. I think it was about 3 years ago. And I noticed here that on the prices of certain vegetables, they went up by like 30 to 40% just overnight. Things for like lettuces and carrots and so on, because where they were coming from had basically been flooded. And I found personally, I've got a community garden patch that I rent. I sort of really found the value of that during those floods, because I was growing and picking my food up here in Tokyo, and it didn't cost me anything. I could just go to the garden and pick it. I didn't actually have to give any money to anyone. But the people who were paying money to buy their food, which is most people, they were the ones that noticed that they had to pay more, which sort of gave me the real sense that if you grow your own food, it's good, because you don't have to actually pay someone for it.
Yeah, and it's fresh and usually organic,
Yes.
Amazing. Let's talk a little bit about your work with schools. You've worked with a lot of schools to set up their gardens.
Yeah. That's been the most amazing thing I've done in my adult life, is teaching young kids how to grow food. And I really wish that I had been taught how to grow food when I was going to school, because I sort of basically quickly realized that that there's a real problem with our food production system, and that's quite simply that commercial farmers, they use insecticides and pesticides and artificial fertilizers to spray their crops and keep the insects away. Those chemicals that they use are toxic and poisonous. So commercial farmers in general, when they crop dust their crops, they're basically poisoning their food. And when we use words like insecticides and pesticides and artificial fertilizers, it's well worth reframing those words as poisons, because that's what they are. So commercial farmers, they largely poison their food. If you and I were having coffee together today, and I put a poison pill into your coffee, I could be charged and jailed for trying to poison you. But commercial farmers, they poison their food regularly. It's legal. There's a big problem with that. The next problem is that many people, that they basically go to the supermarkets and they buy the same food that's been sprayed, that's been poisoned, and then they put it on plates for people they love. And when you really think about that, they're poisoning their family. And I think not so many people really care about that. There's a growing awareness about chemicals in food. It's certainly going up as more people sort of realize that their kids are getting allergies and sicknesses from food. And so I thought, right, there's got to be a much better way to get to produce food. And then it became really clear. Our grandparents' generation, prior to about the 1950s, when commercially produced fertilizers went mainstream, every type of food that was produced prior to about the mid-1950s was what we now call organic. But back then they called it food. And we should call it food because that's what it is. But we now tend to eat the commercially produced sprayed stuff. So I thought, there's a major problem there. And I thought, right, there's a good way to fix it, is teach kids. And so I got into teaching kids. I've never taught anything before I started teaching 9 years ago. I didn't teach English. Got into teaching children at Tokyo International School, and they loved it. And none of them had really learnt about how to grow food, except the ones that had grandparents who were farmers back in their own countries. And I found it was great. I started teaching, and I've now taught probably about 800 students how to grow their own food.
Amazing.
With no chemicals at school. And many of them have basically gone home and shown their brothers and sisters and mums and dads how to grow food without chemicals, because they've learnt it at school, which, like I said before, is something I wish I had learnt because one thing that's just briefly, one thing that's I found was really embarrassing when I started growing my own food was that I found out how good that naturally produced food tastes when you don't use chemicals. And I realized that I'd spent half my life, I did not know what real food tasted like until I started growing it. And then I realized, oh no, what have I been eating for the first half of my life, which was commercially produced vegetables containing chemicals, and I think that's why they didn't taste very much. They didn't taste so good as when you grow food that that hasn't been sprayed. So I sort of realized, hey, when you grow your own food, it's not only cheap and healthy, but it tastes fantastic. Even lettuce leaves, which are pretty boring, they taste good as well. And then getting back to the kids, taste is one of the good things that turns them on about growing food. When they actually taste the first leaves that they grow in, and you see this, their eyes light up when they actually pick and eat a leaf that they've grown from a seed. It's magic. It's it's pure magic. And this is what I'm trying to do, to basically not just teach children skills, which is easy, but inspire them to go home and teach their mums and dads and brothers and sisters and their neighbors. Yeah, because that's when my work will have a real impact, is when I not only teach people how to grow food, but inspire them to share what they know. And so, yeah, I've basically been getting into schools and running workshops and programs. I found that the Japanese elementary schools, they all teach how to grow tomatoes and sunflowers and morning glory. And then their gardening program stops, which I think is nice. They got a gardening program, but I'm continually wondering, why do they stop? Oh, and they grow they grow tomatoes, but why not teach them how to grow cucumbers and lettuces and herbs and mint and that kind of thing? And I found that the international schools, they will have a gardening program if someone at the school wants to have a gardening program and they find a budget for it. But if those factors don't exist, then an international school won't have a gardening program. That's where I come in and I basically pitch, do you want to grow food on site and feed your kids? Yep.
Yeah,
So,
and
yeah.
I love all the techniques that you're using with the students. So you have the raised beds again. You have reuse of PET bottles. So
Yes,
then there's an added sustainable story there, right? About how you should think about what you buy. Maybe not buy the plastic, but if you buy it, maybe reuse it, right?
Yeah. Recycling can play like a really big part in gardening. Like, you can recycle like ramen bowls. You can grow food in plastic coffee cups, in shoes and gumboots, and recycled plastic bottles. You can grow food in pretty much any clean container. So, so recycling is a big part. It can be easily melded in to urban farming to basically show people how to take waste out of the waste stream and use it to grow food.
And you've actually hung some of the PET bottles, or put them on the fence, or hang them by a string, and have little planters there. That's a really nice idea.
Yeah, 2-liter PET bottles are really useful. They can be basically tied to fences using, I forget what they're called, tie straps or something. They can be like tied to the fence, and also they can be hung off a chain that's slung up like a clothesline, and you just basically just tie little strings to the tops of a cut off half of a PET bottle, and you hook it to the fence, to the chain, and on one chain that's strung up like a clothesline, and instead of drying your clothes, it's possible to grow your salad, lots of them. And these chain gardens that I'm describing, they can be slung up over empty plots, car parks. They can be put up on rooftops. They can be slung from the sides of houses down to the ground. There's a whole lot of different ways that they can be utilized to grow food at home, and you don't even need to have any ground space. You just need a place to secure the two ends of a chain.
Yeah.
So really simple stuff.
When I saw that on the chain, I thought, if you also wanted to grow a green screen or a green curtain, it'd be a nice, like if you put ivy in or Goya, something that starts climbing and hangs down, and then that would give you some nice cool shade and look really pretty as well.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that idea. Let's talk about some of the sustainability lessons that you also do with the students, because it's not just teaching gardening outside, but you also give them some advice and have different lessons about thinking about sustainability in new ways.
Yeah. These sustainability lessons were something that I kicked off at Tokyo International School about 4 years ago, and they're basically completely separate from urban farming, and they basically focus on recycling and reusing and repurposing objects to cut down waste. And the first lesson that I taught was about basically where waste goes. You probably heard of the Pacific. There's these two, I forget exactly what they're called. They're these huge, basically whirlpools of plastic and waste in the Pacific Ocean between Asia and the west coast of the States. They're basically just tons and tons of plastic. And yeah, that's where lots of plastic goes, besides beaches and getting clogged up in drains and so on. And I sort of really wanted students to think that when they throw something away, it doesn't just completely disappear, even though it seems to disappear. It doesn't. All our waste goes somewhere. And we need to really think about that and take more responsibility for thinking about where the things that we use actually end up. And then my next lesson was about bartering, which was how people traded stuff before currency was designed. And bartering is basically where you swap things. I like your pencil, and you like my potato. So there's not a good example, but basically you swap some fruit for some vegetables, or you swap some tools, that kind of thing. No money changes hands. It's a very outdated concept, but I really wanted to make that clear that to students that's how people used to trade things before currency came along. And then the next lesson that I
I'm showing your bartering lesson information right now, which is available on your website. And you have a fast fact. In the U.S. in 2001, more than $7.5 billion worth of goods were exchanged by businesses. So even in modern businesses, they do a kind of bartering system.
Business bartering really took off during the 2009 global recession, where many companies didn't have much spare money, but they had things like office chairs and tables and excess computers that they didn't need. So they basically found companies who wanted to exchange. And it really took off. Business bartering, different companies exchanging things that they didn't want. The next lesson that I got into was time banking, which I don't know whether you've heard much about, but time banking fits perfectly with bartering, because bartering is exchanging items and objects. Time banking is exchanging services for no money. They're both done for no money. And so time banking, in a nutshell, it works great if you are living in an apartment or you belong to a school community, that kind of thing. In an apartment situation, time banking is where you basically contact everyone living inside your building, ask them to write down, what's your main skill? I'm a hairdresser, I'm a car mechanic, I'm a dentist, I'm a gardener, whatever. You get all the people who live close to you to write down their main skills, and then you basically share this idea of time banking and say, hey, do you want to join a time bank where we all agree to share our services for no money? Which is great for times like now, where there's a global recession and people are losing their money, losing their savings, losing their jobs, but still need to get their hair cut, still need to get their car washed, still need to get someone to tidy their garden. And we have been bred and basically force-fed this idea that to get something, we need to pay something. We need to pay money for it. Yeah, we don't. I've got 2 arms, I've got muscles, so have you. You can do things, and you don't need to be actually paid pieces of paper or coins with nice pictures on them to do what you do. Neither do I. We can both provide services and not actually receive money for them. And so time banking, you basically get a whole lot of people together who agree to share services on a 1 hour time basis. So if I came to your place and tidied your garden for 1 hour, I would get 1 time bank point. If you went to your neighbor's place and you set up their their new website and it took you 1 hour, you would get 1 time bank point. With these time bank points, you can basically exchange them with any other person in your time banking community for 1 hour of their services. So the service exchange doesn't need to be reciprocal. They can be shared within the time bank group members, which means you can get services for free.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Robert Yellen, who was in the series the other day, he just said, "Great idea." I think it is. It's an awesome idea. I also came across your idea of day trading.
Day trading, yeah, that's awesome. In places like where I'm from, Auckland in New Zealand, everyone's got a lawn and a lawnmower. So in one stretch of road, on a Saturday morning, you'll hear a whole lot of people mowing their lawns. Their neighbours, all mowing their lawns because they all got a lawnmower. Day trading is the concept of you get a group of neighbours together, maybe in 10 consecutive houses. You all get together and say, hey, who's got a lawnmower? I've got a lawnmower. So you find out there's like 9 lawnmowers in 10 houses, and you all agree to basically sell 8 of those lawnmowers, keep 1, and decide to share it on a schedule basis. So the house down the end, there's like a timetable schedule where people can basically enter on a computer when they want to mow their lawns. I want to mow my lawn at 9 o'clock on Saturday morning. The person 2 houses down may want it at 10 o'clock. The person down the road may want it at 12 o'clock. So you basically get rid of the resources that you don't need, just keep 1 or 2 and decide to share it. Then if it needs to be fixed, you share the cost. You don't replace and pay for an entirely new lawnmower. If there's 9 people in your day trading group, you pay 1/9. If you want to upgrade to a sit-on lawnmower, you all pay 1/9. You don't pay full price. And I came across this idea without even knowing it. When I was a kid, my father co-owned a jet boat with his neighbor, and they both bought a really nice jet boat, 24 feet, I think, and they both paid half. And my family and the other person's family, we shared it on consecutive summer weekends. And if it needed to be fixed, both the fathers split the cost. They both paid half. No one paid full price for anything, and they both had access to a speedboat. And I kind of like remembered this a few years ago, and I thought, what a great idea! What a great idea!
I mean, some people are using it for car share, right? Like the car sharing system, and the idea of sharing tools, or
garden tools,
you mentioned toys as well, right? Like
home
having a toy
tools,
library. So
toy libraries and so on.
It makes so much sense, and the whole idea of sustainability in terms of using products longer, extending the life of products is so important, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And it seems crazy that we all have tools that we don't use all the time, so why not share them?
Exactly, yeah. People that have chainsaws and things like paint strippers, you might use those maybe once or twice a year. Why pay full price when you can just share them?
Well, you know, Flo and Blaze, who were in the first Seeking Sustainability, they have a wood chipper. So I said, I've got so much wood, and they're like, bring it over for the wood chipper, you know. So it's great when you can share use of that kind of expensive tool, right?
Yep.
That's wonderful. Let's talk a bit more about techniques for gardening. Hydroponics is really exciting, isn't it?
Hydroponics is a really good idea for urban food production, because especially when you're growing on places like rooftops that may not be structurally strong enough to support a full garden that uses soil. Hydroponics basically uses water mix to grow food, and that water contains a nutrient solution that basically feeds the vegetables. So there's no soil, and that's a big point, because when soil gets wet, it gets very heavy. So hydroponics is, I'm going to be getting into that myself very soon, because I think that's part of the future of food production. And there's now places, there's now like food factories, and there's a company called Freight Farms that was set up in Boston in the States, I think, where they basically convert shipping containers into indoor farms using hydroponically, vertically arranged hydroponic food growing systems, where they grow anything they like inside a shipping container. And the shipping container can be above ground, under a bridge, underground. It doesn't matter where that shipping container is, because they're temperature controlled. So a indoor farm using hydroponic growing methods can grow food 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, which for traditional farmers is a real shock, because we need to deal with things like winter, where it gets too cold to grow food. We need to deal with seasons and insects and things like that. But when you're growing indoors and hydroponically, you don't have to deal with insects. You don't need to worry about it's too cold to grow food. No, because it's completely temperature controlled. Yeah, it's the future, I think, to a degree.
I saw some really cool school projects, schools and universities that are integrating high-tech using computers and hydroponics. So they can do data entry or programming, and the kids can learn how to set feeding schedules or watering schedules.
Yep.
Really cool. Great idea.
It's really cool. Yeah. One more thing about this freight farms concept idea. These shipping container freight farms can be controlled from your iPhone, and you don't even have to be in town. You can be in the next town. You can be in the next city. You can be out of the country and still monitor and control your freight farm through your phone.
That's amazing.
And check the temperature, check the water supply, check the lighting, check the plant growth. The technology's just gone through the roof. It's fantastic.
Yeah, that is. So urban farming training, sustainability lessons, these are things you've been doing with schools. Do you do that kind of consulting also with businesses? Have you found any need for that?
Not yet, no. The greatest demand that I've had from day one is basically teaching people how to grow food, urban farming. Yeah. And I certainly hope that continues, because it's so much fun. It's great, and there's a real need for it. There's more and more people are becoming conscious of our effect and our footprint on the planet. And urban farming is like the silver bullet. It gets rid of the food miles, it gets rid of the chemicals, and it produces great tasting food very cheaply.
Yeah,
it
might be a good time to mention about community gardens. I think a lot of people in urban areas don't realize about community gardens.
Community gardens are great. I basically rented the first one in my local town here in North Tokyo 8 years ago, 2012, after the earthquake the year before. And my community garden, it's one plot in a large community garden surrounded by houses, and my plot is 3 by 5 square meters, which is slightly wider than one standard car parking space. So you could probably drive a car in there, open the doors, and the doors would probably go into the next garden next to it. So it's really small, 3 by 5 square meters. But what blew me away in the first year and really inspired me to carry on growing my own food was the yield. In 2 square meters, I planted 8 tomato seedlings, and in another 2 square meters I planted 8 cucumber seedlings. And within 3 months, in the first year, 2012, I had picked 1,500 cherry tomatoes and picked about nearly 400 cucumbers. That was only in 4 square meters, and my plot was 15 square meters. And my wife and I, there's no way in the hell we could eat all this food. So the neighbors got free tomatoes, they got free cucumbers, our workmates got them. My friends, whenever I met my friends during the summer, they always got they got a bag of free food. And it blew me away. In 3 months, I basically changed from being a typical consumer into a food producer, because I was using a small community garden patch, which was costing me 5,500 yen to rent from the middle of March until January 31st, which is about 10 months. 5,500 yen. And I now grow about 25 to 30,000 yen worth of fresh, safe, healthy vegetables per year in a tiny patch.
Awesome. Yeah.
So it's all good. And yeah, it's just.
How do you sign up? How do you go to your local city office or?
Yep. Yeah. That's a good question, Joy. Yeah. And what happened here in Tokyo and probably other cities around Japan as well is that your local city office, through their city newspaper, will advertise usually in the middle of January. They'll have one issue of their local newspaper, which you can pick up from train stations and city halls and libraries and so on, that will be promoting the oncoming community garden season. And what you basically need to do is you go to your city hall and register for a community garden, and you basically fill out a form and you say which community garden in your town that you would prefer to use. Different towns have different numbers of community gardens. Some towns have none because they're all concrete. I live on the outskirts, so the town I live in, we've got about 36 community gardens, which probably used to be rice paddies back about half a century ago. And so yeah, you basically apply for a community garden, and then there's a lottery. And about 4 weeks later, if or when you win this lottery, you'll get a postcard through the post saying you've won. Please come back and pay the fee, 5,500 yen, get your ID card, and then you'll start when the community garden opens in typically mid-March. And then it's yours. You have a patch, and you can grow whatever you like. Typically vegetables, you can grow whatever you like, and people do. And it's wonderful.
It's fantastic. And the community gardens around my area, I've never rented a space myself, but it looks like really good soil, and I'm so impressed by how much variety they're growing. So sometimes I'll see Hawaiian white ginger, which is such a beautiful smell, or big pumpkins. And so the soil quality seems quite good at these community gardens. I'm impressed.
Yeah, well, with community gardens, you never really know what the gardener who used the plot that you've got put on it the previous year. They may have used chemicals, they may not have. If they're retired, like many community garden farmers are, it's likely they won't have used chemicals, but some may have. But you'll never really know unless you actually see them pouring some kind of toxic chemical stuff onto their gardens. But you just have to basically like it. But yeah, one of the real big bonuses of having a community garden and doing urban farming is that you can expand what the types of food that you eat. For example, when you go to your local supermarket, you might be lucky to see radishes. If so, there'll be one kind. But if you grow your own food from seeds using seeds like this, if you go to your home store, you might see 8 or 10 different kinds of radishes. And the same thing with things like spinach and lettuces. This spring, I was growing about 75 lettuces, 4 different types. But if I go to my supermarket, there's only 2 types. There's green lettuce and sunny lettuce. I was growing 4 types, had a whole lot of them. And with spinach, when you go to your supermarket, there'll be 1 type of spinach. But if you grow from seeds, and you go to your home store and buy spinach seeds, you'll probably find 10 different kinds. Same with radishes, same with lettuces. There's just a whole lot more choice when you grow from seeds, which means you can expand the types of food that you eat and not be limited by what your supermarket decides to sell.
That's great. We just had a comment from Molly B. I think she's in North America. She said, we have a big community garden with 45 plots inside. It's $1 to rent.
$1.
And it's
wow.
And then more plots around the city. The city composts yard waste and puts it on the plot. So of course composting is another great gardening tip, right?
It's fantastic. Yeah. No, because with community gardens and urban farming in particular, soil is the biggest component. and it's the heaviest component. And if you do what I do, you basically go to shops and you buy 25-litre bags of soil and you take them back to your house. That's a bit of a hassle. But if you make your own compost on a large scale, you can basically compost your kitchen scraps and make your own solid compost and use that as soil, or mix it into existing soil to add more nutrients to it.
Yeah, and it's a great way to reduce your waste.
It makes a huge difference, yeah.
When we started composting, our burnable garbage, which used to have kitchen waste in, reduced by half immediately, right?
Yeah, it makes a huge difference. I make liquid compost at home using a system called Bokashi, Bokashi. It's a Japanese system that creates fermented compost. And you basically sprinkle this light brown bokashi powder onto every 2 to 3 kilograms of waste that you throw into your bokashi compost bin, and the powder breaks down this solid liquid, breaks down the solids into liquid. And there's a tap down the bottom that you just open, and you basically pour your liquid compost in, and that's very concentrated. It's dark brown and it stinks. But you dilute it in your watering container and you pour it straight onto your plants. It couldn't be easier. It's amazing.
The plants
compost.
The plants just thrive when you do that, I bet, right?
Well, composting is basically where you take old plants and you convert them into food for new plants. So it's the perfect recycling cycle. It's amazing. Yeah. It's nature doing what nature does.
So Molly just commented she's in Pittsburgh, so in the U.S., and she's lucky to have a small-sized garden. We've got less than 10 minutes now before the end. One of the things we wanted to touch on was some tips if you're having trouble. 5 fixes. Can you give us a rundown?
Let's go through them really, really quickly. Yeah. One of the main problems that people have when they're growing fruit, these are basically 5 troubleshooting tips. One of the common mistakes people make is when they're sowing seeds like this, they'll put too much soil on top. And so when they start to water the seeds will start to grow up through the soil, and then they'll run out of energy and die, and they won't break through the top. So the key to that is to put no more than 1 centimeter of soil on top of your seeds. 1 centimeter is your fingertip. So 1 is probably the most important number in gardening. Don't put any more than 1 centimeter of soil on top of your seeds. That should be fine for pretty much all types of seeds. Number 2, a problem that some people have is they sow seeds in the wrong season. For example, they'll try to grow tomato plants and cucumbers in autumn. Tomatoes and cucumbers should be sown and grown in spring. It's useful to know that kind of thing, and you can learn just by watching what other people in your town do, if there's community gardens, or just by searching for the information yourself. Another tip is you may be getting too much sun, especially during summertime, like right now in Japan. And plants, they need maximum sun, but if it's too hot for too long, they can suffer and die. So if your plants are getting too much sun, you'll see it because they'll wilt. And in some cases, I've been planting plants out the back of my house on a really hot day, 36 degrees. I come home and it looks like they've been run over by a truck. They're just flat and completely dead because they've just been hit by too much sun. The workaround is just move your containers to places to the shade where they won't get so much sun, or cover them with what's called a shade sheet, which is typically a large piece of black perforated plastic, which has got thousands of holes, which basically cut down the impact of direct sunshine by usually up to about 75%, which can be the difference between life and death for plants. Another problem is not enough sun. So like I said before, maximizing sun exposure is critical, especially for plants that grow fruit like tomatoes and cucumbers and paprika and piman and that kind of thing. They need lots of sun to photosynthesize, to produce the energy to produce the fruit. So basically, if you're growing on your outside balcony or outside your house or your rooftop, simply go outside about 3 or 4 times a day, check where the sun is, and find the place that gets the most sun, and put most of your planter boxes in pots right there. Game over, done. That's that problem solved. Another major problem is insects, and insects. Different places get different insects at different times. 2 workarounds for that. Number 1 is to make your own do-it-yourself insect spray, which can possibly contain things like garlic, water, soap, vinegar, even vegetable oil. You just basically find a concoction that you want to make that you believe is safe from the internet, make it. They're usually really simple. Spray it on your plants. The best way that I found to stop the insect problem is just to cover the plants with a insect net. And in particular, caterpillars that usually devour plants, they get on your plants because butterflies can fly in and land on the leaves and lay eggs, which produce caterpillars that eat the plant. Simple solution to that is if you can keep the butterflies from landing on your leaves by covering your plants with a net, you hopefully will completely cancel caterpillar problems. It's that simple.
Or vigilance, taking the bugs or taking the little eggs off, right? Yeah. Like I showed a picture of I have some lemons, and somebody said, take those butterfly eggs off really fast. I didn't even notice. So sometimes people can be so helpful.
Yeah. There's a good thing about insects, is that if insects are eating your plants, that means they know what good food is. So that's kind of like a backhanded compliment when you find caterpillars chomping through your plants, because that means that they know that what you're growing is good for them. But you're both basically competing for the same food. So that's why we don't like insects, because they're eating our food, but they're just hungry like we are.
So you have to share some of it, right?
Share some of it.
Molly said she uses dish soap and baking soda.
Yes, yeah, things like that. Yep.
Great. Well, we have about 3 more minutes. Let's talk about what you're doing in the future, or what you're doing right now during coronavirus. You started a new Inspire series. Can you introduce that?
Yeah. This has basically got nothing to do with any of my other work, but it's basically Inspire. They're basically 1-page articles. I've got some of them here, and they're basically they're a way that that people who are being affected by the coronavirus, who have lost their jobs, who are homeschooling their kids and so on, and going through lots of hassles because of the virus. These Inspire articles, they basically give the message that we're all in this together, and that even though we're all specifically dealing with our own family problems because of the virus, other people are too. And so these Inspire articles, they basically talk about, they get the featured people to talk about how the virus has affected their lives, typically negatively, but some people do say positive things too, because there has been many positive things about the virus. How do people think that we're going to come out the far end of this virus? And they also ask, what can you do to contribute to help other people? And I think that's a really positive thing about this whole COVID situation, is that many people have become much more aware of the problems and issues that other people are facing, because we're all in this together. And I think that's a really good point. We're all in this together, and looking out for ourselves is one way to do it, but if we look out for the neighbours too, that's going to make them want to look out for us too if we get into greater difficulties. So yeah, this Inspire article series is basically tailored to get people to think about the community rather than themselves only.
Yeah, I love it. It's a great concept, and I appreciate you introducing me in your Inspire series. That was so fun to be a part of. I also want to introduce, thank you, on your website, so businessgrow.net, you also sell your farming guide, which is so useful. So if somebody's looking for a practical guide with all of Jon's tips, this is on his website.
It's this one here. It's a 60-page guide that contains 8 years of experience of growing food in Tokyo, Japan, urban spaces. It's a really good guide, especially for people that know nothing. This will help them to get up to speed with growing their own healthy food. Yep.
And you were also saying you have some advice about seasons, when to plant the seeds or harvest in Japan.
I've also got a English language Japan planting calendar, which basically tells you precisely which month to sow vegetables and seeds and when to harvest them too. So the people living here in Japan who can't read kanji, but who can read English, can basically find out when to start growing, because that's an important thing, especially when the growing seasons start in spring and after the summer, which is going to be next month. When the autumn winter growing season starts, we're going to get 3 more months from September, which I cannot wait for. It's going to be like Christmas again.
It's so hot to be out there right now. Yeah, I'm looking forward to when it cools off a little bit. I'd like to send people to your Facebook pages. So Sustainable Cities Urban Food, as well as Food Havens Tokyo, if you're in Tokyo. Yeah. Thank you so much, Jon. There's so much great information you have on your website. A lot of these beautiful publications are available for free and freely to share from businessgrow.net. So everybody should really have a look, and please get in touch with Jon if you need some coaching and mentoring, or if you have an idea for some sustainable lessons he could help your school with or business.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, Jon. Thanks, everybody, for joining.
Thanks very much.
Tomorrow, our talk is talking about great family trips in Japan that she's been doing during the coronavirus. And so Kim Bardwell will be showing her beautiful photographs talking about family travel tomorrow at 5. So please join us again. Thank you, Molly. Thank you, Robert, for your comments and questions. And thank you, everybody, for joining. Please take care and go and grow something. Grow your own food. Thank you so much, Jon.
Thank you.